Thank you, Erica, for having me today. Although I think it's a little bit like, you can get invited. The best way to get invited to a party is to have it at your house, I guess. So, anyway, welcome here to Type Kit. I want to do something to the audio. All right, let's try it again. I want to do something just a little bit different in this talk and tell you a story about something that happened here at Type Kit about a year ago. But before I do that, I want you to do a little visualization with me. Who is on the audio? Nobody. Oh, this is still on? So it's doing that. Thank you. Just take that. Yep. Brian Mason, co-founder of Type Kit. Thanks. So, now we're all set. Let me tell you a little story. But first, this visualization. So, imagine, right, that you're in a place that you find very, very peaceful. Like, for example, this lake. You're maybe paddling along in a canoe or a kayak or something, and it's a beautiful morning. The sun is just risen. There's mist on the lake, and it's very quiet and peaceful. When all of a sudden, your canoe flips over and you're in the water, and you're choking and coughing on the water, and it's freezing cold, and you come up out of the surface, and you look around and realize that there's a couple of teenagers pointing at you and laughing, and ha ha ha, we flipped the boat over, what a jerk, and they swim away. How would you feel about those teenagers? Would you be afraid of them? Or angry, furious, vengeful at those teenagers, right? So think about that feeling for a moment. And then let's rewind and think about being in the boat and the sun is rising and the mist is on the water and it's very peaceful, and the same thing happens. You hear a thump, the boat flips over, you're in the water, you come up choking and gasping, and you see driftwood, a log that the boat had hit, flipped over, washed up to shore. How would you feel about the log? Angry? Vengeful? Frightened of the log? Probably not. One of the things that helps us, not just in the products and design work and everything that we do, but really in life, is understanding our emotions in a way that would allow you to react to the teenagers perhaps the same way that you would to the log. And there's a term for this, and it's a term that I've been using a lot in the past years. We've sort of grown Type Kit and gone through a lot of adventures, and that's equanimity. Now, equanimity sort of officially means a state of mental or emotional stability, especially in a difficult situation. You can think of equanimity as grace under pressure, right? Bad things happen, you respond in a way of sort of seeing the situation with understanding, right? Being prepared for any kind of situation, even things that you didn't imagine could have happened. And that's something I think in all of our lives, and especially in work, especially if you're doing work that is, like a service that has to continuously be running and things like that, that's incredibly important. So I want to tell you about a story in which our team here at Type Kit was tested and needed to show a lot of equanimity. And that story starts about a year ago at 6:24 in the morning when I woke up, not to my alarm clock, but to the sound of splashing water. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? And I went to the bathroom and I found this. So the good news is, I know who this is. This is our son, he's 2 years old. And the bad news is that he was on his third roll of toilet paper, just really working to get it down. Equanimity. So a difficult situation, and you handle it with as much grace as you possibly can. So, we kind of sorted out that situation and started the morning routine. And for me, what that means is logging into Campfire. It's a kind of group chat system, if you're not familiar with it. And it's kind of the heartbeat of our company. It's kind of where everybody goes. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I could see at 6:30 in the morning already that there was a lot of activity happening at Type Kit. There had been code deploys already. People were woken up out of bed and things like that. So things were not going particularly well. And so I saw, people talking about some statistics. So I went over to this sort of monitoring dashboard that we have. Many sort of, if you're an engineer, you probably are very familiar with things like this that kind of show the health of a system that's running. And there was one chart in particular that looked a little bit like this. Now, probably don't have to be very technical to understand that something that was going very smoothly is now going very unsmoothly as of about an hour ago. So to understand what this means and how important this chart is, let me tell you just a little bit about what the service does. So how many of you are Typekit users? Wow, fantastic. Then I'll go quickly. Bringing fonts to the web 2.5 years ago, the way that we were able to convince foundries and keep up with the technological pace of browsers and things like that was to take all of the fonts that we had licenses to and put them in a centralized server so that we served all the fonts for everybody, meaning therefore everybody who used Typekit had to put a lot of trust in us because the design of their site was dependent on our servers being up all the time. So what happens is people browse around for fonts, and when they find the font that they want to use, they put it in what we call a kit, and then push that publish button, the little green button on the corner. And then some sort of magic happens, right? We go from that publishing event, we take the fonts and some JavaScript and CSS and database configuration and put it together in what we call a kit. That kit then gets moved from our servers onto what's called a CDN, Content Distribution Network, I believe. And when that happens, it sort of then populates out into sort of the rest of the world, right? It gets moved out into, pushed out by where the people who are viewing the website would be able to see it. This was a pretty important thing for us to do early on, because it was an architecture that gave us confidence that we could actually sort of scale and be up all the time. That we separated the configuration activities that our users do, that is like find fonts, configure them, add them, from the distribution, right, serve them all the time. So that we could make a lot of changes to the website and iterate that very quickly for the user experience, but never really touch how the fonts are served, so that as we made changes, they would always just sort of, those would always be up and the website would change. Now, back to this, right, the problem that we were facing that morning. What we found out was that the fonts, the kits rather, that we were publishing, that our users were kind of hitting that green button and publishing, were not, in fact, moving out to the CDN. In fact, it was a situation a little bit more like this, that as we sort of waited and waited and waited, we were publishing kits very quickly. They were backing up and backing up and backing up. And so nothing was actually getting out onto the internet. And if you'll just excuse me for 1 minute, I've had a little problem on my computer, but it won't take me more than a second to figure this out. So let me know if it comes back, please. All good? All right, great. So where were we? This was happening. Yes, no good at all. Fonts were backing up. It was the reason in that chart that things were getting really red, right? That chart displayed how many fonts were waiting in a queue to go out to the CDN to be distributed out to the world. So in real terms, people were hitting publish and their site wasn't changing. And that was happening a lot, more than it ever had before. So we had a little stand-up meeting, as you can see from this photo, literally right over there in that corner. And we do that every day. And today, we didn't talk about features and product development, things like that. We talked about the problem. And what we learned was that there was one customer responsible for all those kits, which is a good thing, because now we knew where the problem was coming from. And that customer was a partner of ours called About.me, which is a sort of profile, a profile site where people can sort of, instead of having a blog or anything, they can point people to about.me/their name, and they have a site there that points out to all the social network activity that they're doing. So they have done an integration with Typekit in which all of their customers can use this fancy font menu to click on a piece of text and then click on the font and then it changes. They don't need to know about CSS or anything, so it's quite popular. And what we found out was that they were on TechCrunch that day. Right, classic big wave of traffic when that happens. In addition to that, they launched that day. That's why they were in TechCrunch. We hadn't actually heard that. So So they suddenly had 400,000 new customers plus a wave of traffic from TechCrunch. And they were really sort of slamming our servers. So I called the CEO right there in the photograph, Tony Conrad. And I said, hey, you've got some traffic today. He's like, yeah, we launched. It's going really well. I'm like, yeah. He's like, so fonts aren't really showing up on our site anymore. I'm like, yeah. And he said, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, of course it is. No problem. We'll get to the bottom of it and have it sorted out as quickly as possible. He said, good, because as you saw, it was a Friday, and he said, I want to tell you a little secret. I'm like, okay. And he said, on Monday, we're getting acquired by AOL. I'm like, great. He said, yeah, we're going to be in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and we're going to be on TechCrunch and National, and it's going to be huge. I'm like, no problem. And so we did on Monday, this level of traffic that we're seeing this morning would be the new normal for us. That's great. And the other part of this, which is, sort of interesting and relates to the tiny incestuous Silicon Valley that we all sort of work in here, is that Tony Conrad is not just the CEO of About.me, but works at True Ventures, which is the VC that funded us at Typekit. In fact, he was the investor who did the funding and sat on Typekit's board. So not only was he a very valuable partner to us, he's kind of our boss as well. So it was a fun conversation. As I told him, we'll be ready for Monday, that's no problem, went in the back of my mind. It's going to be fine, we'll have it all sorted out, and this is what I'm thinking, and this is what's going to happen, right? So that's December 17, which of course is the Friday before, perhaps the most social weekend in the world, right before the Christmas break. Our head of technology, Ryan, is going to get on an airplane on Monday to go back east. Our most senior developer, Paul, was going to leave to go snowboarding. He's actually going to cut out early that Friday, and here we are with the service just sort of buckling under the load. So we sort of got into this little room over here and said, all right, this is it. This is why we did do startup. We have a lot of freedom to do stuff, but a tremendous amount of responsibility too. And we've got 3 days to do it. So are you in? And the engineers that we identified as being able to solve the problem all said yes. So we got started. On Friday, we decided that we would simply identify the problem with as much detail as we possibly could, and then on Saturday we would build a solution to solve the problem we identified. And then on Sunday, we would integrate that into our own code base as well as that of our partner. This helped a lot. So now we knew we had 3 days, we had a task for each day, and it was very well structured. So we knew exactly what had to happen. So the first thing we did was sort of this, right? In that room, we sequestered the team. It's what NASA is particularly good at. Everybody knows exactly what their job is. They're protected in this room from anybody bothering them and things like that. We didn't have quite this amount of infrastructure, but the same principle applied. Everybody knew what they were doing. They were in there, and nobody would bother them. That gave them the ability to simply focus on the problem and know that nobody was even allowed in the room. That's a nice sort of psychological separation as well as a physical one that allows people to really focus. The next thing we did was to sort of remove the business decisions that were sort of piling up from the technology problem so that they could write the code. And out here, we could handle all of the sort of big decisions about managing partners and talking to the community and dealing with all of that stuff. They simply had to write the code. That's all, just solve that problem. Whether we were going to throw away all those kits and try to start over and break the websites that had tried, just to catch up, none of those decisions had to happen, just fix the problem. So that's pretty important too. And then of course, moral support. Such a San Francisco refrigerator because all that's in there is microbrew and soy milk. So anyway, but that's important too. Right now, there's going to be pizza coming. It's everything. You have nothing to worry about. Just don't leave the room until it's fixed. So, and so we started, right? And they were in the room. The rest of the team was doing whatever the rest of the team was doing, and the sun was setting here in San Francisco on Friday. And now it's the time to wait. And the waiting is incredibly, incredibly difficult because we had set up the conditions for success, right? Everything, as much as we could, was done there. We had used structure to manage the anxiety, which is always really important. If you have some kind of framework to help you understand at least what we're going to try to do, it's better than just feeling this absolute chaos all the time. And then, yeah, really, It's about waiting. And this is where it gets really, really difficult, because we have so many motivations here that feel like are kind of hanging in the balance, right? We are obviously worried about our customers and the trust that we've built with them. We are also, worried about, frankly, the revenue that's implicated, our partners, our investors, all of that, and even our reputations. And I feel that particularly strong. I was one of the founders. We had this idea. We've been building it. We've been getting a lot of traction, and we felt it slipping away. And all we could do was trust the team and wait. So on Friday, we had, like I said, identified the problem, that we were making kits just fine, right? Our servers were running smoothly, pumping out kits as fast as they possibly could, and had plenty of spare room to make even more. And the pipes between us and our CDN were working fine. The problem was that origin server, right? That's the thing on the CDN that accepts your content and then pushes it out to their network. That thing, the kits were bouncing off of it. We couldn't push things to them remotely fast enough. And so on the 18th, we got started on building our own. And we would replace theirs with ours and host it here, and then just use them as essentially a giant cache, right? The good news, right, one of the sort of very optimistic things that happened in all of this was that we had a plan to do that anyway, because we had a lot of features that we wanted to do. Now, the developers had estimated that was probably about a 6 to 8 week project, so instead we would do it on Sunday. So, if you've heard people talk in the startup community about minimum viable product, this was minimum viable. This was stripping away everything. And that's a really good, actually, incredibly valuable technique to develop with a team. Like, what is the absolute minimum that we could get done? Let's put a date on it, even a ridiculous date like this one. And then sprint towards that. And then we'll build features and complexity around that once we have the core of the thing running. And that's what this team did so particularly well. And then, on the 19th, we started going. We had something like 52,000 kits stacked up, or 152,000 kits stacked up and ready to go. And it was now sort of midnight or 1 a.m. on the Saturday or the following Sunday morning. Set it up to start running, and we were doing 7 kits per second. And I was sort of talking on Skype from home when this was happening. And Julie, my wife, says, "Oh, that'll take you 5 hours and 42 minutes." Because that's how her mind works. So, and sure enough, it did, and it kept working. And then by Sunday morning, the kits, we had processed through all of those that had been waiting over the weekend. They got pushed out to where they were. We were able to deploy that code and integrate it with our partner, and they made the changes that we needed, and we were ready for the Monday morning when they launched, and there were beautiful fonts on all the about.me pages, even Mike's, and we were ready to go. So we pulled through, and we did it. This is how Paul remembers the event. And to me, that sort of represents culture, right? We talk a lot about culture and teams, and it tends to be a little nebulous, and sometimes it sort of manifests itself as Friday afternoon beer bashes or whatever, dogs in the office, whatever you think about culture, right? All of that I find incredibly important. This kind of event that I just described, I don't think that's what builds culture. I think that's what tests culture. The same way your immune system, right? Sort of, you work on it and you essentially sort of build it up over months and years, and then when you get really sick, you test it to see if you will get well again. That's exactly what happened here, and that's how I think about culture, is that we take these values that we have and define them as like what our team is about, but then we practice them every day in even the simplest, smallest ways, whether it's autonomy for the team or great collaboration. Every little thing we do, whether it's hanging out in campfire or having a morning stand-up in our office, is about building culture so that when events like this happen, we're ready for them, right? And the team will then have the skills to be able to deal with that with equanimity, right? That grace under pressure. So that doesn't mean, having some Zen-like state all the time in offices like this, even though that's kind of cool. But it's not this sort of very spiritual sort of, yes, anything can come at me and I can handle it. It is actually tangible things, right? Skills that we can develop as a team. So when I think about this sense of equanimity, I have 3 things. I'll take you through them very quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time this morning. But 3 things that I think represent the skills that a team really needs. And one is feeling a sense of security. Another is feeling a sense of trust. And then the third, I think, is being driven by purpose. So these 3 things, I'd like to kind of show you examples of how to manifest those day to day. The security thing. How do you get a team to feel safe? How do you feel safe in your own work? Because I think I've observed that the only thing you can really do to innovate, right, is to feel safe enough that even if you fail at the innovation, it won't matter, and that you can respond quickly and it'll be okay. So this is incredibly important because everything that we build on the web now, for those of you who work on the web, will know that we depend on services that are outside of our control, no matter what. Even if you put the box right here in the office, right, the wire that goes into the box still is going to be powered by somebody that you don't have control over, right? So we are dependent on everybody else who's building the web. All together, we're doing this, and when a piece goes down, this is a screenshot of Amazon from earlier this year, right, where you see the red dot halfway down. That's the whole East Coast gone. Nothing works, right? Any service that uses AWS was gone for 2.5 days, right? So we need a plan, right? And so for us, just from San Francisco, we know about emergencies and disasters, right? Like the city falls down and burns up every century or so. So having an emergency response protocol is very, very important because it makes you, not only are you prepared when it happens, but it makes you feel safe in this sort of ambiguous and uncertainty that happens. So here's a couple things that we use. First is the clear and immediate roles. I talked about sequestering the team. When these things happen, it's really important that that everybody sort of knows what their role is and identifies like that. So the first thing that we did, right, and do when these problems happen all the time, is to identify the repair team. Who's going to fix it? Who's capable of fixing it? Great, go in the room, fix it. But one of those people in the room needs to be the person that communicates out so that the rest of the team and the company and the investors and the customers and all don't keep asking, any change? Is it working? Is it working? Is it working? You can't work if somebody's asking you if you're working, right? So we have a note taker inside the sort of scribe that then says, we've discovered something else, we think it's going to be another hour, or whatever. But that person, right, is the one responsible for saying to the rest of the team what's happening. And then somebody out here listens for that and messages it out to the rest of the world, right? Whether it is our partners or investors or customers, most importantly, they know what's going to be happening. And you do that with as much transparency and honesty as you possibly can. So those are all very important. But what happens is not everybody is awake all the time, or not all of the problems are as severe as getting people out of bed. So what we've developed is this sort of protocol for identify what kind of problem it is, copy and paste the thing into Twitter and send it out, right? So this is essentially a decision tree with pre-written tweets with variables in it that you can change for what the actual problem is. Blog posts, status updates on and stuff like that, which is given, again, security. The developers know that in the midst of all of this at 2 a.m. when shit is falling down, they don't have to write and compose a tweet that's going to have good grammar and be spelled right, stuff like that. Really, really helpful. The other thing is making a distinction between their application, the customer's application, and your own application. So I showed this really sort of rudimentary and rough graph as part of the monitoring system. But one of the things that's important is using the same user-centered design and same amount of attention to detail on the things that you use internally to run a system as you would for the things that your customers are going to use when they visit your website. Inspired a lot of what 37 Signals has shown off. This is a thing they have on their intranet that sort of flows by continuously showing activity that people are doing, typically associated with revenue. Inspiring for us is something that Chris and Mike and our team have put together. This beautiful dashboard. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly because those numbers aren't public. But a beautiful piece of software that we all now, of course, use as our start screen when we launch our browsers. One thing we haven't done, but I've been inspired by Panic software, is to now make that sort of visible and tangible in the office space. Panic software, this is their dashboard that lives on a giant screen that's running all the time, that's on all the time in the place in which they work. So making the stuff that you use to sort of understand how your system is doing and how your customers are behaving in the real world. So it's just in front of you all the time. It's the first thing you see when you turn your head. I like that a lot. Not just internally, right, but externally as well. This is our status blog where we, again, as transparently as possible say, things are okay or they are not, right? And I think that's difficult to get your head around, is that when you have a problem, you want to like sort of, I'll fix it, hey, hang on, I'll fix it, right? No, the first thing you have to do is say, we're down, something's wrong, we're going to fix it, but you need to know that, right? Because again, that's saying, that gives your customers the confidence that you'll be honest with them, and that they will know as soon as you know, and that's really, really important. And then these postmortems, right? Like this is, again, there was a big outage from the third set signals products, and they write very clearly and apologetically and transparency about what happened. This is not marketing copy. The best ones of these are written by the engineers who fixed the problem, not marketing. That's really, really important, because that's transparency, because this is a communication to other engineers and developers who are going to decide whether or not to use our product. So we do a lot of that as well. Now, that's security. Let me talk about trust for a minute. And what I mean by trust is getting a team to trust one another, because I think that's critical as well for doing really, really solid work. One thing I think about a little bit is what I call ambient accountability. I don't know exactly where I got that term, but it's one that I really like. And what that means is getting a team to trust one another by making their work and the progress that they're making very visible. I am a huge opponent of the sort of yearly review, especially peer reviews. It's artificial and it's got all kinds of motivations behind it. I hate that crap. What I really like, can somebody bring me power, please? I forgot that. Thank you. What I do really like instead is, like I said, making work visible. Thank you. That people can see what's happening all the time, so that they feel confident, like, oh my God, like a lot of good work is happening by that person, that person, that person. Clearly, I can trust what's happening in the whole company, right? So, so we use real-time chat for that. There's a lot of benefits to real-time chat. I consider it the main mechanism that we use, since we're also a distributed team, about half here and half elsewhere. I kind of also don't like email, right? Email is so formal. You have to write paragraphs and you say, thank you for writing these. I have thought about your problem, and the answer is no, right? Or something. But how many of you, honestly, right, could get maybe a 3-paragraph email from your boss and respond like this? Nobody. Yeah, like, it just doesn't feel right. Oh, my whole team in the back, yeah, thank you. Good. But no, it just doesn't feel right. But if you're in chat, right, if it's just flowing by all the time and it doesn't have that formality, we see stuff like this happen, which I really, really like. Let's see, do I have to start that? Yes. So these are the kinds of conversations that happen with, right? Yeah. How many emails would that be, right? Like, and this was 8 seconds for the conversation. This is what I really like. But there's no, all right, and this is the kind of stuff you scroll back and you see all of this, you see the work happening, you see who did it. It's all tangible and visible, and it's not reading hundreds of emails. It's a quick scroll in the morning and then kind of keeping up throughout the day. The other thing that really makes this work is we call the sort of typekit robot. This is so our chat system that we use has a fantastic API, right? Yeah, 37 Signals has done a good job on that. So we can put stuff into the string, right? That the robot is out like looking and listening for, which is great because that makes people use it. I mean, I in past lives have sat alone in a campfire room waiting for people to come, and then somebody would pop up and say hello, and then we'd say hello, and then they wouldn't use it anymore. But the way that we've gotten a lot of traction is putting information that you need to do your job into Campfire and make that the only place where it is. So if you're going to do things like a code deploy, the results of the deploy will be in Campfire. So everybody will go in there and see if it worked, right? Pull requests or support tickets that show up, right? Or even revenue events. Anything that happens in the life of the company can just be pumped into there. So you can go and look in there and hang out all the time. But it also shows you the work that people are doing again, right? You know, you can see, wow, Brian's deploying a lot of code today. And you see the changes going out in the site and who's responsible for it. And that brings a sense of accountability and therefore trust between the team members. And I like that an awful lot. Now, the last part of trust is something much more on the product side, and that's design critique. This is a photograph of the room where Frank Lloyd Wright would bring his young architects that work with him, and they would put their work up, and the team would critique the work. I guess my first recommendation would be don't put a big tree in the middle in front of the work. But he was an architect, so we'll have to trust him. But I did a lot of design review when I was in Google, where I spent about 2.5 years. And it felt a lot like this. Let's see. Yeah. That's what designers would come in with their beautiful ideas as clay pigeons and say, see, and everyone would just off they go. That sucks. It sucks a lot, and it makes people really don't feel that sense of trust with the rest of the team, that they know that they're just going to get shot down all the time. So instead, I think one of the things we've worked on really hard here is, first of all, not even talking about design, but instead we call it product review. We are going to review parts of the product, whether it is a URL proposal from one of the developers or a new UI that we want to roll out. Those meetings, I think, are vital as a sort of pace and momentum, do them all the time. I always feel that, that attendance should be optional, but if you do come, participation is mandatory. No laptops, no nothing. We're there to solve problems. It's not a forum for expressing opinions, right? Opinions kind of don't matter. What we need to do is solve a problem that the company is facing moving forward, and we're going to figure out how to do that together. It's collaborative, right? And it's not, it's honestly not a critique session like you would think of from, art school or something like that. So when I say not opinions, like let me give you a good example. A lot of times somebody would put something up on the screen and you would imagine a sort of like somebody saying, I don't like that blue, right? That's not good. That's an opinion. Great, we don't like the blue. What's better would be to say, why is that blue? Right? That's okay. That's less of an opinion. That's more getting at the decision making that's been happening. But the best, I think, is color really important here? If it is, what are the decisions that we've made to use this particular color? You know how different that is from simply saying, I don't like that blue? It's, and that is a way to have a conversation and to work together, collaborate towards making something. And then finally, it's really important at the beginning of any conversation about a product or a feature or anything you want to roll out, is that you sit down and decide, is this going to be a convergent meeting or a divergent meeting? Will the discussion lead towards consensus and lead towards a decision that we're going to make and that we're going to execute, right? And that's a very different meeting. Like everything, like we can say no a lot, right? No, let's not do that, let's not do that. Let's do this. Converge on an idea. Or divergent. Let's brainstorm. We don't know what to do here. Let's get all the possible ideas. Every idea is a possibility. Let's put them all on the whiteboard. Divergent versus convergent. That has been, like understanding that has helped me so much, just like sitting in a meeting with a bunch of people who haven't been involved in the product, but have a lot of decision-making power, especially in large organizations, where they say, you know what, I think we should use streaming video here. Like, what? Like, no, we gotta solve this problem, not open it up broader, right? Or very much, right? Or one person is being really obstinate, saying, no, we must do this. And you say, like, no, this is divergent. We need as many ideas as we can. Setting that expectation at the beginning, incredibly important. So all of this is sort of driving to the purpose, right? Like ultimately the way that teams feel solid together is to have something bigger than that, right? Because this stuff is really hard. It's building the web stuff, or any design work that we do. Because the stuff that people see, right, in this sort of illustration, above the waterline, that's what people see and go like, oh yeah, that's great, that's not. They have no idea about below the waterline, how much work this is. And not just to launch something, but to run something all the time, right? It's incredibly difficult and nobody understands that. That's why we see this crap all the time on Twitter, right? The sort of, you can only love or hate things on Twitter. There's not enough room to have any more nuance than that. And this is the shit you see all the time, right? Because like they don't understand what's below the water, how much work has gone into this, and why like the thing that I get for free that I obviously deserve and need all the time is broken. And how long do you need it? Well, that's a fail, right? And I completely agree with Dan, who says I'll never use that word again. I'm complaining about somebody because if you've ever been on the other side, there's nothing harsher, right? We're going to get that all the time because people just don't understand. And that's what's important, that everybody understand on a team what the purpose of what we're doing is. And I tend to think very, very, very big about purpose, right? And that everything that we're working on today is an instantiation of a much bigger idea that we're trying to drive, frankly, humanity towards, to be perfectly honest. So one of the things that makes me really excited about the web, and therefore the reason that we're all building this kind of stuff, is that when you look at civilizations, ancient, right? The thing that they have in common to make them successful has been literacy. Or to put another way, this idea that I am going to share my ideas even if you're not around, so that you can find them later. And all the technology that we have built over the last, I don't know, 20, 30,000 years has been around sharing those ideas so that we can connect with other people, even if we're not in the same place at the same time. Leave your ideas so that the future can learn from them, right? Whether it got mechanical, got bigger and bigger, right? We try to sort of organize that in some way, and then finally we got to computers that can help us do all of that. And we built this sort of tremendous network that does an amazing job of keeping us all connected, but also helping us share what we learn, right? And if you build stuff on the web, and if you make services, right, that drive towards this goal, it's a tremendous, tremendous responsibility, right? Because we are, honestly, if you think about it, everything we build on the web is trying to move us all forward so that we, as people on the earth, can get better. So that's the thing I'm going to leave you with, right? You need to feel, you got to get a team to feel really safe and trust each other, but also, what are they driving towards? Because once we all kind of agree on that, you can deal with almost anything that gets thrown at you. So that's what I had, and thank you very much.